Good morning and welcome to our Live Talk program. This is Lloyd Grubb here, your host on Revive Reform Radio, doing our Live Talk program covering natural health. And this is your Wednesday morning, rise and shine and give God the glory. And this morning here, I'm looking at the topic, faith is not following the herd, but test and prove. Faith is not following the herd, but test and prove. So we're continuing our talk this week on faith and how it strengthens molds the character. And we're talking about some practical things again this morning. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you again for the blessings of your word and the blessings, dear Lord, of knowing thee. Pray that you may bless us, dear Lord, as we test, dear Lord, and we see, dear Lord, your goodness and your blessings in our lives. May you be with us, we pray, for Christ's sake. Amen. So this morning here, I have some articles I want to share with you on health and some more so current events, health issues that are going on in our society. But I want to talk about and wrap all of this up in our continued discussion on faith and show the practicality of faith and that faith does work. And that's what I want to do here with you this morning here. So faith is not following the herd, but test and prove. And so I want to remind you of my premise for this week. Spiritually exercising faith gives strength of character, tone, hardness, and mental strength. So when you exercise faith, and faith which I define a little bit later on, again, as I do every morning, when you exercise faith, as it is laid out in the Bible, when the Bible says do this and whatever it's asking you to do, it is not according to what the herd does, not according to what the general population around you do. And you do it and you prove that the Bible is right and the herd is wrong. Then what happens is strengthen your character. It makes you tougher because you tend to prove. Now, I'm not talking about belief, in the sense of I just believe this thing, I have this philosophy. This is like a lot of people, when you listen to, they talk about Eastern religion. It's a lot of philosophy. I believe the Bible teaches something different. The philosophy is lifestyle philosophy. And so when you practice what is taught and you see that it works, it makes you tough. And it makes you tough when you watch the herd goes in a different direction and get culled. Then you say, oh, really, the Lord word is right. Now, I was to say, there's the difference between the Bible and philosophy. Many people believe the Bible is really just a philosophical book, just some thoughts. And many people, religion are thoughts. There's no practicality to it. But when you live the word and the word becomes flesh, the word is powerful. And so spiritually exercising faith gives strength of character, tone to the character, hardness to the character, and mental strength. Makes you tough. And so we want to do this. So before I read this text here, before I go into some of the articles, just to show the practicality and the toughness of what I'm talking about. In Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2. Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, it says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So if you notice in verse 2, the Bible talks about we have to renew our minds, get in a different thinking. So if we're in the process of salvation, we would not be in the herd mentality. The herd mentality is what is the problem, in essence. Most of the time, I should say. Now, it says, be not yet conformed to this world. So the way the world look at life and do life, and things that are accepted as normal, that's the way it is. Some of it might be right, and some of it might be true. So one has to prove. And often as you go through life, you start proving that a lot of what is normal in society and makes absolute sense, even to yourself, you will prove that it is not normal thinking. It doesn't make sense. It's nonsense. So, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. It is a refresh. You need a refresh. You need to look at things from a fresh point of view. You look at society, most of the troubles that society goes in is because everybody's following the herd. And this herd mentality is leading to all the troubles, because if somebody's doing it, I must do it too. So it says that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So this is where faith is not the faith that regular religion and Christianity teach. Our faith that we believe as the Bible teach it is a practical faith that you prove. When you prove something, that means you go and test it. You go and try it. You go and make sure this thing is what they say it is. It's not just I accept a bunch of philosophy and somebody said this is truth, and I don't go test the truth. I don't go analyze it. I don't go prove the truth. Gotta prove the stuff. You know how you prove something. They say a car has 180 horsepower, and you go and you put it on a dyno. You put it on something that can test what is the power of 180 horses, and then somebody say yes, it's proven, and you say okay, and so forth. Or you have this amount of brake power, stopping power. You prove stuff, and so we believe in proving. We test. It's not blind faith. It's faith that has been tested and tried, and we know it works because our lives are dependent upon it. And when we're talking about this morning here, there are life and death issues. And so if I'm preaching something that I know. If a person follow it, I better prove it, because it's life and death. Somebody could die because of what I'm saying. Worse, somebody could even lose their salvation because of what I'm saying if I'm wrong. So what is the perfect, the good, and so prove what is that good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. You want to prove that. So God asks you to test him, to test his word. God doesn't ask us to be blind. That's some paganism right there. So I'm going to go into my article, and I'm going to go to the first before I go anywhere further. And just having these windows, I'm just trying to grab a window. Sorry for a second here. I have a bunch of windows here behind each window. So I'm going to go, my first article here I want to share with you, and you're familiar with it, so I'm going to share, you're probably familiar with this issue going on in the country and in other countries also. It's not just in America, where there's a measles outbreak, and it's hitting Washington, California, New York, various different places. And I think it was yesterday, the mayor of New York up and announced, Bill de Blasio up and announced yesterday. So that's not the article I'm going to read. I'm going to read a different one just to show you this stuff is happening all over the country. But Mayor de Blasio from New York City issue a forced vaccination order that if that especially in the Jewish community in Brooklyn. So that means if you're not being vaccinated and you're in an area that is an outbreak, you're going to be, and you refuse vaccination, you're going to be fined $1,000 per refusal, because they're trying to up herd immunity, and herd immunity has to be 95% of the society has to be immunized for herd immunity to work. So this is what's happening. So I'm just going to read this article now. This is a different incident. I wanted to mention an incident. So that get a lot of people in the Jewish community panicking. And then it gets a lot of people in the natural community panicking who don't believe that in vaccination, whether it be adults or kids. So that's what's happening right now. So there's been a kind of a buzz going on from yesterday about that order that they could send people to your house and force you to vaccinate. All right, so that's there. So I'm going to read a different article, since most of you probably are familiar with what happened there. This one is taken out of California. So UC Davis Medical Center warns 200 people of potential measles exposure. Doctors urge parents of any child suspected to have measles to call the hospital to help prevent any further exposure to the disease. In other words, don't show up at the hospital. Call first. Don't come. As measles outbreak continue around the country, a large Northern California hospital is warning at least 200 patients that they may have been inadvertently exposed to the disease by a child who showed up in the emergency room with respiratory symptoms. The 7-year-old girl was brought to the ER 2 weeks ago with some symptoms of measles, but not the typical textbook characteristics of measles, says Dr. Dean Bloomberg, chief of pediatric infectious disease at the University of California, Davis Children's Hospital. Measles, when it starts off very similar to a lot of common community-associated respiratory viruses. In some children, Bloomberg said that the disease can start out with fever, running nose, running eyes, and cough. And before the characteristic rash develop, sometimes it can be very difficult to diagnose. The patient came to the emergency department March 17, and the patient was suspected of having measles March 19, Bloomberg said. At that time, the patient was placed on appropriate isolation. The UC Davis case underscored one of the difficulties of containing the disease. Infected people can have it for days without knowing it and come in contact with many others, spreading it even before showing symptoms. Most cases of measles occur 8 to 12 days after exposure, but it can occur up to 3 weeks after exposure, Bloomberg said. Even vaccinated individuals can get measles because the vaccine is not 100% perfect. We need a very high vaccination rate because when measles is introduced to the communities that have parents who don't immunize their children, these clusters of cases can occur. Those clusters of cases could be the harbinger of worse things to come. Back in 2000, measles was considered to be eliminated in the U.S., a major public health victory. Before the vaccine became widely available, an estimated 400 to 500 people died each year. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, there were 48,000 hospitalizations with the disease each year and 1,000 who suffered brain swelling or encephalitis. As vaccine hesitancy has grown, measles has begun to reappear. So far this year, there has been at least 387 cases of measles in the U.S. across 15 states, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. That compared to 372 reported cases of measles for 2018. Many of these cases in 2019 are clustered in 6 outbreaks, including Rockland County, New York, Clark County, Washington State. This is largely due to growing vaccine hesitancy movement powered by misinformation campaign. According to the CDC, 91% of U.S. children between 19 months to 3 years old have received at least one dose of mumps, measles, and rubella MMR vaccine, well below the 95% needed to achieve herd immunity. In California, the percentage is slightly higher at 92.9%. So I want to keep that in mind. Herd immunity is required to be 95%. With the drop in vaccine rates, we may be headed back in that direction. A measles researcher and a professor of biochemistry and molecular biologist at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. It seemed that we may be approaching the level where measles could be considered again an endemic in the U.S. One problem is that doctors may not recognize measles right away because they've never seen it, Catania told NBC News. I think doctors now will be alarmed and go back to their books and get accustomed to what it looks like. Parents who suspect that their children might have measles should call the hospital before arriving so they can adequately prepare, Bloomberg cautioned. What we can do in those cases, kind of situation, is let them in through the side door and place them immediately into isolation room. We don't want them in waiting rooms where potential exposure may occur. 154 cases of Okay, so that's my next article. All right, so here you have this thing here called where they say 95%. So this is the thing with the measles outbreak going on. So measles, as we covered last week, is has various different disease characteristics in the initial stage before the bumps come on the body that could mimic a cold or something like that. So it would be easy for a child to go into the hospital if the doctors haven't seen the results of measles or not knowing they should test for it, wouldn't even know what they're looking at. Child comes in, they're in waiting room, they're in other places where there's a lots of people, especially if it's a big hospital, and they expose other people to it. Now, as the numbers is 90, I read those numbers again, 91.1% of the U.S. children between 19 months and 3 years old have received at least one dose of MMR vaccine. But they're saying that's below the number that needs to be for herd immunity, which is 95%. They're saying basically if 95% of, almost 1.95, no, almost 9.15 of every 10 person gets the vaccine, then the whole communities is protected. No problem, they would say there. Now, remember, we're still talking about fate. I'm going to get there in a second. Just building this case here. So I'm going to read now this idea here of what is herd immunity, just for your brains. So herd immunity, also called herd effect, community immunity, population immunity, or social immunity, is a form of indirect protection from infectious disease that occurs when a large percent of a population has become immune to an infection, thereby providing a measure of protection from individuals who are not immune. A population in which a large number of individuals are immune, chains of infection are likely to be disrupted, which stop or slow the spread of the disease. The greater the proportion of individuals in a community who are immune, the smaller the probability that those who are not immune will come into contact with an infectious individual. So that makes sense, I guess, to a certain degree. So what's happening if there's 100 people and 95 of them have been immunized and they are not susceptible to the disease? So if one out of the next 5 that are not immunized and then they're susceptible to the disease get the disease, as they come in contact with the other 95, since they're immune and they won't spread the disease or catch the disease because they're immune to the disease, then it will stop the flow of the disease, and the disease won't spread from one person to the next person, because there's disruptors. Most of the disruptors happen. Well, also the doctor, if you notice in the article I just read, stated that the immunization is not 100%. It's not 100% viable or works. That means what he's saying here, to what I'm getting, is that if you probably vaccinate 100 people, I can't remember the rate, but whatever the failure rate is, some of the people will not be immune. So those people now could go hug somebody with with measles, saying that they're immune, and they catch the disease because the vaccination didn't do anything. Well, what had happened in this last outbreak that's going on, with the 300 and something people that's been sick with measles, is that a percentage, and most of the time we don't talk about the percentage, but they claim the smaller percentage of people were vaccinated and still came down with the disease. So the immunization is not 100% bulletproof. It does not guarantee. It doesn't work for everyone. Some people it fails that, and I guess they'll have to do multiple, whatever. And as you know how the immunization work, you get a small dosage of the disease, just enough to expose the body to it, and the immune system grabs it and learn the disease. And then now when the immune system gets exposed to it again, or the body gets exposed to it, the immune system will go into action and know how to kill the disease because it's familiar with it. That's the whole idea there. And I want to say this other thing here in the article. So the measles went across. It's about 15 states, 372 people so far that got it, and the biggest outbreak is going on in New York and Washington State. And in this disease, this measles, I just want to talk about what it does again, just for your mind before I go on to my next topic. So it can cause, yeah, that there it is. So 48,000 people each year the disease, and 1,000 suffered brain swelling. So I want to point out that 1,000 suffer brain swelling, but in the vaccination, this is one of the side effects also. And then the rash all over the body is one of the side effects. So the vaccination actually comes with the side effects because you're giving the person measles basically. And also the person could react to it. And so now they're trying to increase the herd immunity by forcing more people to get vaccinated. As more people get vaccinated, what will still happen is that the disease will still occur. And although they said they have eradicated it in 2000, it came back. Whatever the thing they're saying that caused it to be big in Rockland County is that there's an outbreak going on in Israel. And some of the Jews who travel back and forth between Brooklyn and Israel brought it back and then started infecting each other. No clarification of what's going on in the other 14 states, including Washington. Why is it an outbreak there? Pardon me. So the other thing also, in order for you to gain herd immunity, you'd have to vaccinate the whole world to 95%. Because as you know, we are living in a big community where people travel. And people travel from country to country. And so as you travel from country to country, you're going to never have, unless everybody in the world, all 7.7 billion people would be vaccinated, then you'll never have a true herd immunity, at least probably in a community, but not there. So that's one of the problem with herd immunity. As remember, faith is not following the herd, but test and prove. So faith is testing and proving. And so if the person got vaccinated, then I would think the vaccination should work, and then you shouldn't worry about the vaccination. I mean, worried about catching the disease. You just take the vaccination and you get immunity, whether you're herd or not. And when you expose, you will be bulletproof. I think this is part of the problem with the concepts of drugs in general, especially with what I'm going to read next, which I'm going to read next about the drugs like penicillin type drugs, the antibiotics. The premise of many of these things is this idea of immunity. And a lot of what immunity really is that the immune system is not you're immune to it. Because I think immunity can sell a false concept. It's not that you're immune to it in the sense of exposure cannot affect me. But it is the idea of immunity to me is simply that the immune system can fight it when exposed to it. That's what it is. And I know somebody might say, yeah, that's what it is. But I'm just saying, sometimes it is a false concept. And what I mean by that is, say you hit the person with some drugs. Say you hit the person with antibiotic. The concept with that is that, say, for instance, you don't have to either quarantine, treat, cleanse, do the things you need to do to prevent and to also overcome it when you get it. The idea that the drug itself should make you be able to see a pig pen, walk into the pig pen barefooted, barefooted, I don't know what you call it. And the antibiotic will make you be immune to all the pathogens that that pig has released in the mud. And this is how in industrial farming they use antibiotics. It's the cleanliness is ignored. The treatment is ignored. The process is ignored. And what it is that the antibiotic is supposed to do the job and to give you immunity. You see, this is the concept of immunity. In my mind, or somebody said, no, Lord, that's not the definition of immunity. Yeah, I know what the definition is. I'm just saying it's a false safety that it gives to people. It gives a false safety to people to make people believe, even if they say that's not the official definition, that's what the people think. Is that I take this thing And I don't have to, ouch, sorry for that. I don't have to, computer doing its own thing. I don't have to do what I need to do to protect myself and to build my body up, because this drug is going to be the thing that's going to help me. And the problem is it does not work. No drug work like that. If I'm deficient in vitamin C, you could hit me with certain things, but I'm still deficient. I still need this thing in my body. I need some food. If I'm not bathing properly, if I'm not treating a disease with the natural methods that need to be treated, telling me that, say, hey, you take this thing and you're immune. It's a false concept. And this is why a percentage of the people who are vaccinated are still catching the measles. And they'll say, oh no, because the vaccination didn't work. None of it worked. Your body has to be able to fight, and that's just simply what it is. If it doesn't, and you still have to know to treat the disease, you still have to know to do what you have to do to overcome the disease. That's my premise. It's better to know how to do natural treatment for the skin, the lungs, build the immune system, and know to fight it than to say, oh, I'm going to take this vaccine and I can walk in a room with people who have measles and nothing's going to be wrong. The idea of notice it here, I think the hospital is doing right. If somebody is suspected of having measles, they should be brought through the side door or the back door. They should be put under quarantine. It's better not to get exposed. And that's just, to me, the way to do it. And if you get exposed, to learn how to treat the thing still. Because that type of stuff is a false hope, I believe. Before I read the other article, I want to say this to you. Because remember, we're talking about faith is not following the herd, but it is test and prove. You test and prove what is right or what is wrong. Now, here is where faith becomes in. So you believe in the help message, you believe in the Bible, the biblical message, and more so, like me personally, I believe that Ellen G. White is a prophet, and that what she says is rock solid, and science have been proving this. And the next article I'm going to show you, going to prove what I'm going to read next to you. This is taken from Review and Herald, September 5th, 1899. She wrote this at 1899, over 100 years ago. And it says simply, drugs never cure disease. They only change its form and location. Nature alone is the effectual restorer. And how much better can she perform her task left to herself? Right? And then later on she talked about using soft water and using other means to treat disease. All right? So I'm going to read all of that. But I just want to read that part there for you. I'll probably come back later on and read the whole paragraph. So drugs never cure disease. They only change the form and location. I've covered this over and over again, or many times enough. So if you listen to me regularly, you're familiar with that statement. So what has happened? If you've been following the news last year, you noticed that there was a polio type disease outbreak, similar to polio. Same type of, it looks the same thing, same way. What's going on? What it is that the drugs never cure. There's no such drug that cure disease. You basically manage disease until the person die or the drugs kill them. That's what drugs do. This 100 years since that statement was written, all science have done is prove that drugs never cure disease. Nature alone is the effectual restorer. That means you have to make the immune system deal with the disease, learn the disease and get strong. That's the whole idea of vaccination anyway, expose the immune system to it. But what is find out is that a lot of time people will be exposed to something and they get hit with it later on and they still get sick. I'll give you an example. Think about the flu virus. How many people take the flu vaccine and get immediately sick because the exposure overcome the system and sit down to fight hard to get rid of it? How many people got the flu vaccine every single year and almost every single year they get sick? How many people got the vaccine 10 years ago and 10 years later they still get exposed to flu and they get sick? Why? Because when you understand viruses and bacteria, they're living organisms that they constantly mutate. They don't stop mutating. And when you hit them with the drugs, the virus or the bacteria, whatever the form that is coming at you, whatever that disease is coming at you with, it will learn the drug, learn how to become resistant to the drug, and it will change its form due to that learning the drug. This is what it is. It changes its form, or it mutates, and it becomes resistant. So now when you hit it with the same drugs, it does nothing. So that's why you could give a person flu vaccine this year. It doesn't matter next year. Even if they didn't get sick and the flu virus vaccine didn't cause any ill effect in their body or side effects, next year they still have to get hit with another one. And they're never sure, because the flu every year changes form and its location. It changes how it's going to affect you and what organ is going to hit harder. That's what it does. You look at this and show me. In any way where this is questionable, this is what's happening. The disease are living organism that constantly mutate. And when you hit them with a drug, whatever that drug is, they're just like, study the drugs. They're just like the immune system. It's just the opposite of the immune system. They study the drugs, understand the drugs, and then they create the immunity to the drugs. And so now that disease become tougher. And they say the disease now, the virus or the bacteria is now drug resistant. Well, that's the statement right there. Over 100 years ago, it just says the disease will always be drug resistant. The body will find a way. The virus will find a way. They're intelligent organism. They're intelligent life form. They're just small, intelligent life form. They're like flies. They're small. Somebody I remember who I was talking to, and they said, it is weird when you see a small spider come at you, like stand boldly at you, looking at you. You'd be like, this thing like you want to attack me. Does he understand I could crush it like the spider it is? But they will. Snakes and all these things do that. Intelligent life forms. So I'll just read some of the rest of the statement. So drug never cure disease. They only change its form or location. So somebody could say, oh yeah, we eradicate this thing. Really? For now? Until they figure out what to do. And then it'll come back. And that's why all these things are coming back. Syphilis is on the rise. Gonorrhea is drug resistant. AIDS is coming back. Trust me on that. All these diseases, because what it is, they hit them with drugs, until the disease takes a while, but they figure out a way. And then when it comes back, they say, oh, it's more dangerous, because it is. It's more resistant. So drugs never cure disease. They only change its form and location. Nature alone is the effectual restorer, and how much better can she perform her task if left to herself? But this privilege is seldomly allowed. If crippled, nature bears up under the load and finally accomplishes in a measure or double task, and the patient lives. The credit is given to the physician. But if nature fails in her effort to expel the poison from the system, the patient dies. It is called a wonderful dispensation of providence. If the patient has taken a course to relieve overburdened nature in season and understand, notice he said in season, because it depends on what you're dealing with, winter, summer, or spring, or fall, and understandingly use pure soft water, this dispensation of drug mortality might have been wholly averted. The use of water can accomplish but little if the patient does not realize the necessity of strict attention to his diet. So diet, water, allow nature to work. Now I read this for you because remember, now we're talking about faith. So all of this information, you say, okay, before I read my next article, what does it have to do with faith? You see, because faith is test and prove. The herd, so faith is not following the herd. The herd have a philosophy that it has been tested and proven to be a failure, but it's the philosophy that the herd holds on to. Now you come and you say, I have to learn to make nature work. I have to learn to allow nature to work. You don't even make nature work. Nature does its thing. Let's say the immune system and the body, fight or flight organs and hormones and stuff, hormonal glands. I have to know to use soft water. I have to know to have a proper diet. I have to know to work with nature to overcome the disease. The other way is you say, well, you dispense drugs. And when you dispense the drugs and you say, wait a minute, people who got the drugs, they're still catching the measles and they're still getting sent to the hospital. And then some of them will even die. What's going on? Again, you learn to make nature does the work. What they're trying to do is work in a way that the drugs become the hero, not the immune system. not the God-given system made to deal with all these viruses. What we're supposed to do is work with the immune system, learn how to. But with drugs, it's an unconscious thing you're doing. You're saying, I'll take the drugs, so I'm good. So if I say to a person, say, should you learn to do water treatments? Should you learn to use natural methods to overcome the disease? They say, no, I'm good. I don't have to worry about it. I just have to take this shot and I'm good. And because the whole herd is doing it, everybody believes that's the way to go. And then what notice it says is the system is under pressure. And the system has a double work. And as you see, a lot of the problems that are going on in society, what is causing it? And the problem is that they talk about the side effects of the drugs, but they don't talk about all the people being killed and maimed by the drugs. So the drugs become the hero, and yet you look at the people, they look sickly, look like they have some type of weird diseases. So I'm going to go to my next article just to illustrate what's going on. This is yesterday, right? So this article is April 9th. 154 cases of fast-moving multidrug-resistant deadly fungus in Illinois. The sickest of the sick are the most at risk, the CDC expert says. This is written by Ben Kesslin and Felix Gasson, both MDs over there at NBC News. Illinois health official announced Monday that since 2016, they have seen 154 cases of a fast-moving, often life-threatening fungus, adding concerns about the fungus spread. Monday's number makes Illinois the state with the second highest occurrence of Candida auris, an emerging multidrug-resistant yeast that can cause infection and in some cases death. New York has 305 reported cases of the fungus, and New Jersey has 104 cases of the fungus. Dr. Tom Chiller, chief of mycotic diseases branch at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, told NBC News that Candida auris is causing invasive infections globally. It acquires resistance fast, then it remains resistant. It has the ability to develop pan-resistance, Chiller explained. So I might pause there. So when we talk about resistance, what we're talking about is a statement that was penned by Ellen G. White over 100 years ago. What it's saying basically when it says resistance, in other words, when the fungus is in a person, the Candida, you hit it with one drug, it resists. You hit it with another drug, normally antibiotic, it resists. And it just resists till now this thing here is have a pan resistant. That means whatever you have in your medicine cabinet and you hit it with it, it does not do anything. It doesn't kill it. You just look at it and like, yeah, what you just did, and keep mutating. And this has been happening over the decades where these penicillin, they just keep becoming resistant and resistant. And we're slowly seeing the result. I don't know if it's slow, probably it's fast because there's so much of them. Seeing the result of all these diseases becoming resistant to all these antibiotics, whether it be, I say, syphilis or gonorrhea and all that. So they might say, oh yeah, we have overcome the disease. None of them. There's no such disease. If you look at what's going on with AIDS, you find that it's not being overcome. It stays in the reservoir and it's learning how to overcome all the different antiretroviral drugs being hit at it. And it's making its comeback. Because why? The prevention and how to naturally treat disease is not focused on. It's just this one drug. Take this drug in. Keep living a lifestyle. So we continue here. So it has become pan. It acquired resistance. Okay, so it's a global. It acquires resistance fast and then it remains resistant. It has the ability to develop a pan resistant. While yeast normally reside in warm, damp spaces, Candida auris can survive on cool external skin and cold surfaces allowing it to spread more rapidly than other forms of Candida from patient to patient. So this is important for you to know. And this is where many people in the medical field are worried, because they're saying this resistance, this constant mutation of these diseases as they get hit with these various different drugs is becoming scary, because some of these diseases can be in water. So somebody could drink like hepatitis. They drink some water, put it down, and you make a mistake, pick up the water, drink it, and you catch hepatitis. Here, why this is so dangerous and could cause major problem, and I believe will cause major problem, is because this disease here, it is normally in warm, damp areas, but here it can be external on the skin. So you could touch the person's skin and you catch the disease. It could be on a cold surface, like when I'm touching my desk here, and it allows spreading to be more rapidly, and it can go from patient to patient. So this is important to note what we're dealing with. So when I talk about faith is not following the herd, but testing and proving, I'm guaranteed there are so many people over the last 100 and something years. I've read the statement that I just read, and they've lost it. They're like, "Oh, she's crazy. How could she say drugs never cure disease?" And yet, if you ask them, "Have you ever seen a person cured by a drug?" And they say, "Yeah, the person take it and the disease stop." And then later on, if I wait a minute, the disease was still there in the system, just dormant. You see, and then the person become a carrier, all that type of stuff. And they'd be like, think about it. But here we're living in a time where it's not just an issue of discussion, if or not. It's an issue that all what's going on around us in the hospitals and in the medical system is that these diseases are resistant. These diseases or these bacteria, virus, fungus, whatever it is, these pathogens, they're not being stopped by the disease, the drugs anymore. They're becoming resistant and they're killing people. So yet that will force me and you to still have to say, so what do we do with the disease when we get it? So it is not acting like a typical Candida. Candida is acting much more like a bacteria. Chiller said, we are not used to yeast acting that way. You got that right? In a press conference Tuesday, Dr. Janice Verley, infectious disease specialist at the Nassau University Medical Center, said it is concerning that the fungus is multidrug-resistant. In essence, it limits our treatment options, she says. Verley added that many patients have been shown to be sensitive to a variety of antifungal drugs, so it's important that the fungus is quickly and accurately identified, although that isn't always easy. It's been challenging to identify, but we are getting better at doing that, Chiller said. Verley said literature suggests that people ill from the fungus have a high mortality rate between 20 to 50%. So that's a very high mortality rate from a fungus. So the fungus now, not your regular virus bacteria, your fungus is acting like it's some type of bacteria or virus, which is crazy. Patients with a delayed diagnosis of Candida auris have had a 30-day mortality rate of 35%. 35.2%, according to one study on the website of the National Center of Biotechnology Information and the National Institute of Health. So I'll pause there again, and I'll pause here. Patients with a delayed diagnosis of Candida auris have a 30-day mortality rate of 35%. So a person have it, they don't know what they're doing with it, they're probably daubing it with some various different whatever. And 35, almost 1 in 3, a little bit over 1 in 3 will die from it. This is serious, from a Candida. Patients already at risk of infections are most vulnerable to the fungus grip. To me, right now, the threatening part is in the sickness of the sickest of the sick, those patients who have medical invasive procedure, who are hospitalized, those are the real risk at-risk patient, Chiller says. Another thing that worries health expert Candida auris is difficult to get rid of once it is in the hospital or clinic, which means health care facilities may need to use a higher level of disinfectant. Chiller said he isn't concerned for the general public, but that is important for all of our hospitals to remain vigilant. In Illinois, the director for the State Department of Public Health told Chicago Tribune that his department is testing people in healthcare facility where people have the fungus and is working to ensure proper infection control practices. He urged Illinois residents to get educated and to stay safe. End of article there. So I'm doing the same thing here. I'm telling you to get educated, to stay safe. Cleanliness, the Bible teaches without, that's not a quote, this is not a quote, but this is what you get from the Bible, especially when you read the Old Testament. Cleanliness is next to godliness, right? Keeping the body flush, knowing some natural remedies, including like cranberry and other things like that, to flush the body of, fungus yeast, finding natural means like thyme extracts to deal with bacteria, learning how to use for disinfectant in your house, which I start using, which is white vinegar to clean certain things. Why? Because even some of the bacteria and stuff, they're becoming resistant to chlorine. So if you can limit or not use chlorine, then it's good, because when you probably need to use it, you don't want the bacteria in your house to you get used to it. And I'm serious about that. You find other natural means that are more difficult for the bacteria to overcome. As I say, I try to use thyme extract. You have certain cleaners, I think from 7th Generation and other companies like that will use thyme extract, which is a good cleaner. White vinegar to clean other things. Try to find some natural means to clean. So that means if you have if normally how I use white vinegar instead of bleach, if I have like a thermos or something with food, and you open it, it starts smell, or you pop it open, it pops, because the bacteria start to release air or whatever, or take the air. I don't know what they're doing. You rinse it, spray some white vinegar in there to kind of disinfect it, and then you wash it. You just don't wash it, you sterilize it. You clean it by getting all the debris out. Spray the vinegar in there. You clean it. Water, I should say soft water, is your friend. The more water you flush your system, is harder for any type of candida to develop. Try to find natural soaps, not soaps with antibiotics or any type of stuff in there, but soaps that are just natural, so that the flora on your skin become viable or stays viable. Because what it is you're doing, you're making sure that if you would run into a problem, I'm never one gonna say in an emergency you don't do what you have to do, but you want to make sure keep your system away from drugs as much as possible, if not altogether, so that again, if the need arrive and you needed to do something, knowing that the disease will change its form and location, but you need a reprieve, at least your body would not be used to it. Because what it is that they've shown is that people in the community, they use so much antibiotic that if they're in an emergency and they need to be hit with the antibiotic doesn't do anything for them anymore. It doesn't help. And sometimes I'm one of those people who believe that if you have to do something for emergency, you do it. But while you're doing it, you do your natural, and then you try to make the natural work and try to figure out, because you just need to buy yourself time. In a pinch, you buy yourself time. So, because you understand, nature is the effectual healer, but you have to also know how to use nature, how to use natural remedies, how to use water treatment, how to use sleep, how to use whatever. So I read that for you because I want to show you, as they're pumping out and they're saying, yeah, everybody needs to be vaccinated. What they're not talking about is, so what do you do if you get measles? How do you treat it? How do you do lung treatments, skin treatments? How do you quarantine a person? This is what they need to get the community to know, because again, people who have the vaccination are coming down with it. And as I said, drug does not cure disease, it only changes form and location. Many of these diseases are coming back, and they're coming back totally drug resistant and totally violent. And what's going to happen? You're going to die if you don't figure out something. So you better figure out how to use the thing that is given to us. So let me read this now to you. In Psalms 35, verse 5 through 11, let's have a few more minutes here. Psalm 35, verse 5 through 11 says, they look unto him. So later. They look unto him and were lightened, and they face, so Psalm 34, verse 5 onward. They looked unto him and were lightened, and their fears were not ashamed. This poor man cried, and the Lord heard him, and saved him out of all his troubles. The angel of the Lord encampeth round about them that fear him, and deliver them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. O fear the Lord, ye his saints, for there is no want of them that fear him. The young lion do lack and suffer hunger, but they that seek the Lord shall not want anything. Come, ye children, hearken unto me, and I will teach you the fear of the Lord. So I read this text because of verse 8. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him. Why this is so important is when we talk about faith is not following the herd, but it's testing and proving. Now, you could do something that the herd is doing, and you've tested and proven that the herd is right. You could do something different from what the herd is doing, and you've contested and see that the herd is wrong. But it is important to note that you're not going to resist drugs. Say, I'm not going to take no drugs. You're not going to treat your body right. You're not going to eat right. You're not going to learn natural ways to treat disease and then say you're on the right path. You'll be on the wrong path. And I'll be the first to say you're on the wrong path. In order for you to taste and see that the Lord is good, you have to try something. In other words, you can look at the food and it can look good. It can be decorated nice. It can look very plated. Food is plated, it looks good. And you could taste it and it tastes excellent. And you could taste it and it tastes horrible. But there's no way for you to know that it's good based upon looks without you testing. You got to know. You got to learn for yourself. And so it's the same thing with disease. If you have a disease, you got to figure out, how do I treat this disease? And how do I treat it to live? How do I seriously treat it? But one can't just say, hey, I'm not going to take that drugs. I'm not going to get vaccination. I'm not going to get no penicillin. I'm going to get... Yeah, you have to be against certain things, but you have to be for certain things. And it's important in life for you to know, what are you for? What are you testing? What are you trying? Because if you're not trying anything, you're not doing right. So as I say, if you are in an area having a cluster of outbreak of measles, you can't say, well, I'm just going to take the vaccine because people with vaccine are coming down with the disease. And if you say, I'm still not going to take the vaccine, well, you don't have to take it per se, but you got to know how to treat the disease. You got to know, what do I do if I get it? And then when you do that, then it's not just, it is true faith. It's not blind faith. It is, you have proven and you have tried and you have tested that the Lord is good. And you know, it's not now, I believe that the Lord will bless and I'm just going to pray. You're going to pray over what you have known to work, and you can trust in and know that this is reliable. So that's the difference between blind faith and faith that the Bible teaches. You see, the Bible teaches that you have proven what is the good and acceptable will of the Lord that I read in Romans earlier. You have tried and know that these things work, and you now have faith in them. You believe that garlic is a powerful cleanser, it's a powerful killer of pathogens, and you've known how to use it. You understand what water treatment does. You understand breathing treatments for the lungs. You understand how to fight the battles of the skin. And so you know what to do. So you have to know what to do, tested it, and then you depend on it. But you can't just say, I'm not going to do nothing. which some people do it. I've heard people that say, I'm not going to take any natural supplements. And they just look horrible. They look like they need some food. They're dying of for lack of nutrients. You can't do that. You can't just say, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything drug-wise. I'm not going to do anything, whatever. I'm just going to make the body do what it does. The body is deficient. All these drug-resistant disease and all these diseases and pathogens, it just tell you the body is deficient, number one. And the other thing, too, is like people are not clean. Normally you just don't walk around and then you just pick up a STD. Normally you have to be doing sexually immoral things to pick up STD. It's a lot of this type of stuff, I believe, is because of a cleanliness issue. It's because of the diet. It's because of all the filth that these animals are raised in. And because these animals are raised in all that filth, it is transported or given to us when we eat these animals. I think it's how many people are living. They're living in very filthy conditions. And as people walk away from God, the filthiness increase. Sexual filthiness increase. People be weird and perverted. They do things with animals they are not to do. As people walk away from the Bible, they become more immoral, and their surroundings are filthy. Their bodies filthy. They're eating all this junk food. They're drinking all this junk drinks. Eating all this denatured, pesticide-filled food and all that type of stuff. And so the bodies are weak. And so any little thing that the body should be resistant against or should fight, it overcome the body and beat the body up very terrible. They can't recover from disease. And so I read Hebrews chapter 11 verse 1. And it says, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So faith, as you read it first, it could come across as something blind faith. But notice here the Bible talks about substance and evidence. Our faith is based upon substance and evidence. We test stuff. We prove what is the good and acceptable of God. We do true faith as is written in the Bible. We don't do blind faith. Never do blind faith as you look like a fool. Because what it is, you will end up saying, I'm not going to do anything, and you have no plan. And then I remember years back, there was this guy, and these people that are talking about, when I think it was the swine flu was going around. And they're saying all this conspiracy with the swine flu. And then they catch the swine flu. And then I said, then what now? Your time you worried about who created the disease and who is doing what, you need to figure out, if I catch it, what do I do? And how do I prevent myself not to catch it? But if I do catch it, what do I do? That's true faith. Faith is practical. Faith is not something that just talk. You got to know what to do. And you got to know what to do to try to prevent it. That's number one. And then number two, if you do get it, how do I treat it? That's true faith. Romans chapter 10 verse 17 again says, so then faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. If you notice, Israel was blessed by God. It was God's special people. But one thing you know about Israel, when it was obedient to the word of God, and about Israel, what God gave Israel was a lot of rules and regulation when it comes on to deal with disease. Lots of it. And you and I are spiritual Jews. It doesn't mean that we are spiritual Jews in an impractical sense. We are practical spiritual Jews. Our diet, our lifestyle, our surrounding, all has to do with being blessed. We don't do faith religion as in fake religion. We do true religion. What is that? We taste and see that the Lord is good. And so we not blessed because we just blessed. We blessed because Lord say, hey, do this, do that, do this, do that, do and live. And everything that we do tends to blessing. So as I say, how is your surrounding? How is your pantry? Do you have natural remedies, some herbs, some treatments? If you get sick, do you know how to treat diseases? We practical. How is your body? Is it cleansed? Is it herbed up? Is it food up? Is it taken in natural foods? Is it watered up? Is it washed and cleansed? Not just by the blood of the lamb, but by some herbs that have saponins in it, some water. How is your walk with the Lord? Is it practical? And so we're going to talk more about that tomorrow as we continue this series. But as I say, true faith is practical. It's tested and proved. It is tried in the fire. It's not just talk and pray. we got to do something. And we got to know how to do something, especially when it comes on to disease and the mind, the diseases of the mind. Let us pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, I thank you, dear Lord, for your word. I thank you for the instructions in your word. And we thank you, dear Lord, for when we do all that we can do, we leave the rest in your hand. May you bless us, dear Lord, that we might walk by faith. This is my prayer. In Jesus' name, amen. Thanks for being with me here on Revive Reform Radio. Looking forward to talking to you again tomorrow morning, where we should talk about current events. Until then, I pray that you may continue to walk with the King.